we are now live. Rob Dyrdek, thank you so much for joining me here on a 21 Hats podcast conversation. Rob, I think my audience, they may know you as a professional skateboarder or as a reality TV star, the host of Ridiculousness. They probably know that you've got some real entrepreneurial chops and they may not know that you've started something called the Dyrdek Machine, which is kind of in the business of manufacturing entrepreneurs and companies. And I think that's primarily what we'll talk about. But the thing I wanted to start with is this. You're out there in Beverly Hills. There's some glam aspects to what you do. You're on TV. Are the lessons that you've learned, do you think they are relevant to the everyday life of the more traditional entrepreneurs that I suspect are subscribing to 21 Hats and watching this video?
I think so. I mean, look, I think it's, I am the elevated, but I still started at the bottom, and I was raised by entrepreneur wolves, right? When I was 11 and 12 years old, like the skate shop that I started going to was founded by a 19-year-old serial entrepreneur who I watched build company after company after company. And then he helped form the Alien Workshop, which is the company that I became a professional skateboarder with, and helped name and build that company when I was 16 years old. And so for me, I thought it was always my destiny to be an entrepreneur, as I was raised around entrepreneurs. And I built and started my very first company when I was 18 years old, and for me,
You weren't in Beverly Hills then?
Was not in Beverly Hills. I had moved to San Diego, California, and if I did have the relationship with what I like to call founder market fit, where I had a relationship in the skateboarding industry as a professional skateboarder. So it was easy for me to form a deal with a manufacturing company to create Orion trucks, Orion aluminum, as I called it. I was reading the book, The Orion Prophecy, at the time. And I brought in 5 of the best skateboarders in the world and pitched a concept to the manufacturer, and then built this entire company and brought it to market for 0.5% of sales. And I thought, look at me, I'm a company owner. I did it. I built my first company. Little did I know that they had tricked me and gave me 0.5% of sales, and I thought I had really done it. But that was my first lesson early on in the entrepreneur game for me.
Well, let me be clear. What exactly was the lesson you learned? What did you take from that?
It was lack of education and knowledge, right? At the end of the day, I went and I built this company, brought the entire idea to them. They were the manufacturing and distribution partner. And I thought it was a great deal that they were going to give me a $500 a month salary on top of 0.5% of sales, right? And I didn't reach out to a mentor. I didn't reach out to somebody to help me. I thought that I'm now a company owner because I now had a percentage as it was related to the sales. And that's, there's a big debate in my world of like, oh, go to college or not go to college, like start a business and learn as you go through it and learn your lessons. And I think there's a lot of validation in both. But the more you can educate yourself before you start your first business, I think the less difficult the learning by fire is going to be, because the truth behind most entrepreneurs is they've got to go through a cycle of building and failing for an amount of time before they finally land in what they understand well enough to create a successful business that becomes their magnum opus, right? And I think that is one of those things that's sort of underestimated. And the more you can learn about a particular industry, a business, whatever it may be, before you actually try to do it is invaluable. And I think it's not spoke about enough,
My sense is that the best way to learn maybe the only way, is to be close to someone else who's going through it. If you can be, number two or three or four or five to someone who's trying to build a business in an area where you're interested, that's a priceless education that you can't get at a school.
And you got to be aware. You got to know what you're trying to learn. You have to look at all aspects of business. Most people see business through what they understand the most. You're a product person. You look at everything to do with the product creation. You're a numbers, a finance person. You're looking at the way the finance structure is. But if you want to create a business, especially a consumer product in this day and age, you've got to understand product and brand, because they're different. Your product's what you're making. Your brand is the way you bring it alive and the soul of your business. You got to understand media, owned, paid, because that's how you're going to basically build your story. Then you got to know how to market it, and you got to know sales. They are not the same. And then ultimately, you've got to understand operations, how this whole thing interconnects, and then finance, because that's ultimately the lifeblood of the opportunity. Does everything, all of these things connect to make a financially viable opportunity? Most people focus in on what they love the most or know best and try to build a business around that, and are deficient in these 7 core capabilities that leave them struggling and going through these heavy loops and cycles of failure and retrying, because they didn't take the time to understand business multidimensionally. So even if you sit next to somebody, you still have to look at that whole business. Even if you're a brand and marketing guy, you have to understand business multidimensionally.
What of those core competencies didn't come as naturally to you? Was there a part of it that you struggled with?
It is 100% operations and finance. Right. And because what am I? I'm a pro skateboarder, creative guy, marketing guy. I can, create these great ad campaigns to sell skate products. I can create a campaign that leads to me now being on television. Right. I had so much, I thought I was a business guy because I was finding success. And then the failures I would point to, things that made sense to me through my brand, product, and media and marketing mind, right? And it was only when I decided to stop and dissect and look at every aspect of business, then decide how much and how well I knew it. And I realized the operational and financial side was what I tried to completely avoid, right? So then what happens? Oh, I'm going to hire a director of ops. I'm going to hire a CFO. Now, the problem is, since I didn't take the time to build general knowledge in these particular core capabilities, I can't hire properly either. Right? Because my interview process and how I speak to somebody, and how you can just sell me in an interview. And I'm like, this guy knows operations. This person's so organized. This is my CFO right here. This guy knows numbers. And I almost had this, beautiful self-awareness of all of that at once. And then became, once I focused on like mastering financials, it changed my whole life. Because now I look at money completely different. I look at what money means to me. I look at every dollar that comes in and where I put it and what the return on that dollar is and how long it took to get the return, ROI and IRR on everything. Then I tie all that back to time and effort, right? So that you end up looking at everything so much more clearly when you really, really understand the financial side of not only your business, but your goals and life, and how that business feeds your financial goals, which ultimately lead to the lifestyle that you want to live, is sort of the core fundamental of why you need to master money in your personal life and business.
What convinced you that you needed to master the financials, and how did you go about doing that?
Well, look, I was fortunate enough that I was still having a tremendous amount of success, because I was still taking so many shots, right? Like, so even if I was having a ton of failures, I still had plenty of capital that I had earned along the way, right? And so for me on the financial side, I hired a full-time CFO consultant to just start teaching me every single aspect of modeling out every single venture that I wanted to do, right? Every single business, and going through and building these models. And then we began to create what I call tactical models together. Like, I want it to be fully understood, what the contribution margins are and what the cost of goods and how this all ladders. And then to operate this business, I want to be so clear on the cost structure of every single thing that I do and understand every single one of these cells and why they exist. And then that clarity evolved. Now, so I did this over and over. As I looked at every business, we would build the model out together, right? And in an incredible deep dive, right? And that required having somebody that had the skill set, but ultimately then in being able to quickly and efficiently build financial models and assess businesses. And this is an operational minded CFO, right? That could look at a business holistically and build a plan together. And then it became clearer and clearer, and then it became exciting. It went from like, I can't finance, like, make me tired. I don't even like, I just eyeball it. I know I'm making more money. I know I got to pay this much. I make this much, cut this in half. I think I'm spending this much. I should be good. It's when I began to get excited by it, then it evolved into like, no, I want to look at, my entire life financially fully integrated, right? Because I read a business book in this era called Start at the End, right? And the concept of the book is decide what you want the outcome of your business before you ever start it. And that doesn't, and if you want to build a business and sell it for 50 million in 5 years, or you want to build a business and it do 500 grand a year and net you 100,000 in profit, and that your goal is to live the rest of your life running your business and making $100,000 a year in profit, whatever it is, decide what the end game is. And that really made me reflect and look at my life and say, like, no, what type of life do I want? And then how does business integrate into that? And then how do I build businesses with the same start at the end mentality, where all of them serve the way that I ultimately want to live my life as a whole, right? I stopped looking at my life as my work and business and my life. I looked at it fully integrated, both from a personal and goal level, but also from a financial level.
What does that mean to look at it fully integrated? How do you integrate the two?
Well, meaning I have extraordinarily ambitious goals for my business, right? My Dyrdek Machine venture studio. Now, to me, quickly, I want to build 50 to 100 businesses that I sell for 75 to 200 million dollars and make $1 billion in liquidity, right? In order to
That's
do
ambitious.
that, right? So in order to do that, I need to own between 25 and 75% of each one of these ventures, right? So now, from a lifestyle perspective, right, I have my early stage goals, right, where I want $100 million and this is very, very ambitious, but I want $100 million in asset and cash producing assets, right? Non-correlated cash producing assets that I get to live off of for the rest of my life. So there's my personal side, right? Now, so that this is my goal from a personal investment side. Here's my venture side, if you will. So it ends up being real estate and venture for the most part. And then so now they're integrated, right? So one's leading to the goals of the next one, and then it becomes time and energy. Right. So now I've designed, what type of life do I want to live? Well, being an entrepreneur is extraordinarily difficult. I can't run multiple companies. I can only run one. Right. And that's the Dyrdek Machine. So it's essential that I build with founders that can be the operators and run these businesses. Right. And I have to create a business that allows me to systematize and create a ton of value and be able to curate elite entrepreneur minds that give us a clear pathway to create value and create some sort of a liquidity event, whether that be dividends through profitable, high margin, high targeted consumer business, businesses or growth companies that lead to acquisitions, right? And create a liquidity event in that way. But I still built that as one, right? One that's serving both the way I want to live my life, the expectations for what I have for my lifestyle to be, and then ultimately how I want to spend my time and energy, right? Because to me, it's still about, you want to grow into living this effortless, beautiful, peaceful, happy life is actually what your goal is, even if you are an entrepreneur, right? It's your goal is to go through the fire to get to automation, to get to sustainability that allows you to ultimately just continually optimize your business rather than constantly trying to like have your business be in survival mode. That is the goal of an what a goal of an entrepreneur should be. It is automation, systemization, and optimization, right? Is what you have to get to find peace and happiness, right?
I want to come back. I just want to plant a thought. I want to come back to this. I want to ask you kind of what your why is. Why $100 million? Why $1 billion? What you get out of this? But let's hold off on that. I just want to put a pin in that for a moment. I want to say to our attendees, thank you for being here. If you have questions for Rob, throw them into chat. We'll get to as many as we can. But first, I want to take you a little bit through the Dyrdek machine and what you're doing with that. I think it's really fascinating to set about creating a way to create businesses. Let's start with, what kind of businesses are you looking for? What kind of businesses do you want to create?
Consumer products. I mean, we're market agnostic and look at a lot of different things, and have done some media stuff and some SaaS stuff, which I, am not entirely excited about, because this is what I love. Truest life passion is a one-on-one conversation with an entrepreneur. No, just general idea. Then like, wow, no, that would be amazing. We should do that, right? And now I'm having this conversation, assessing somebody. Do I believe they have general knowledge in the 7 core capabilities, right? Like, and do they have the experience? Are they talking about a product and idea where they have founder market fit and have some understanding of the market and the opportunity, and they could navigate it at an accelerated pace? Then we get all excited. Then it's just like, oh man, here we go. Like, then it's like, then the idea emerges. Then we call that the discovery phase. Then let's do an immersion into that market and make sure that it's not being done 100. There's so many times that I have been like, that's an amazing idea. No one's ever done it. And I do one search and there's like 20 of them. You know what I mean? Or sometimes I'll be like, this is like a $50 million business. And I'll find, 3 or 4 that are 5 or 6 years old that never broke a couple $1 million. Right? It's like, okay, there just isn't a market for these, right? Like, so the process is about, how do you create a,
How do you know? Let me stop you there for 1 second. How do you know they just didn't get it right? How do you know that there's no market for it?
Yeah, look, it's an intuitive decision you have to make, right? Because at the end of the day, here's the thing in diligence. There's all diligence is all the reasons you shouldn't do something, right? You never do diligence and all of a sudden like, this is an amazing idea. Diligence is like, okay, feel pretty good, right? It's like, because you still, and why I call it, systematically fusing art, science, and magic, because it's a creative, like, you can shape an idea and nuancely shift it, and now it becomes a massive opportunity, right? So even when I look at an idea, I'm even looking at it like intuitively now. Is there a way to twist this a little bit and make it more unique that it appeals to a broader market, right? And it's still very much based on that intuition and looking at so much and beginning to see so much. Even how you talk to that entrepreneur, I can talk to an entrepreneur in 15 minutes and understand the range of their capabilities, right? And I know like where I'm going to get stuck. I can tell if I'm talking to a sales focused entrepreneur CEO versus a financial or versus a brand, like it's very easy to kind of see. So you're trying to piece all these things together when you're making that decision on that idea. But again, art, science, and magic. Like the science is the fundamentals of business. If you want to start a business that has 20% gross margins and like you're gonna like let me give you a really good example of a really hard business. Beds. Right. There was this huge boom of beds of like, oh man, Casper, bed in a box. Like, well, guess what happened? Your lifetime value in the purchase behavior of a bed is one, right? Over 15 years. So you sell one bed and like now, oh, we're delivering it to you and you buy, but you got to get you every day, you have to get another customer versus when you have, something like Mind Right, My Good Mood Superfood, that's a platform that has bars and mixed drinks and all these different things. Like they're now buying, when they love the product and loyal, they're buying it every single week, day, month, year, right? Like the lifetime value, not in the customer acquisition, all these fancy online terms. Can you create a loyal customer that will buy your product for life is when you got a big opportunity, right? And I think like the positioning of your product's value prop connected to your brand storytelling is where that actually happens. But for it to actually occur is magic. It's magic. I don't care what anybody says. Like every single one of the businesses that I have had that have gone on to be acquired or at a really large stage, it is this just amoeba of like unforeseen, amazing circumstances that propel it to the next level. It's never, even though I do extraordinarily sophisticated financial overlays and that I call the unified theory that's tied to the capital needed, the equity needed to give and option pools and capital needed all the way along the way to create value to get to a liquidity event. And it's like, here's our goal, all of this stuff. And need I remind you, you can sell a business for 50 to 150 million to two or 3,000 people. Anything above 200 million, you're selling it to like 10 people, right? So again, not relatable. Might be Beverly Hills in you a little bit over here, but it's still, even when I get these real plans, tactical revenue models, it's chaos on the way there.
Could you walk us through one? You're at the Dyrdek Machine. You found your founder. You got the idea. You're excited. Walk us through the machine method, and if you could give us a real example.
Okay, so I'll use Mind Right, right? So originally met the CEO who was the CEO of another consumer packaged goods company. I said, hey, if you ever want to build one day, like reach out to us. I'd love to build a company with you one day, right? So like planted the seed. 8 months later, he said, hey, I'm going to be leaving. I'd like to create a company. He came and pitched a vegan cookie dough. He presented this concept of vegan cookie dough that could then be cooked as a cookie at the same time. I'm like, oh, I like that. That's interesting. You could chew it and it's vegan, or you can cook it. We did a deep immersion in our discovery process, saw that the actual vegan cookie dough market was tiny. Now, if you can actually bake it, you're just competing against vegan cookies. Didn't like it. It didn't have enough differentiation. He said, okay. He came back 3 months later, said, I'm going to blow your mind. He presented a concept of showing that functional, how the better for you snack foods went from better for you to functional to hyperfunctional, right? So it went from probiotics to then collagen to all these things in the next frontier, and then as it evolved into vegan and these superfoods at the next front, and then he showed how nootropics and adaptogens in the supplement space were emerging at the same time, that there was this huge opportunity now to connect the two and make a functional superfood that has nootropics and adaptogens for both long-term brain health and mood enhancement, right? And I'm like, this is it. So then we go into the immersion space. There's almost nobody in there. There's a handful of people, IQ bar and some different things. Now we look at the competitive landscape. We got founder market fit, right? Because he had just come from another bar manufacturing and running another bar business, so that he now fully understands this industry completely and thoroughly. So then now we do this deal, and how it works is we're co-founders, right? So now we're co-founders, and then we put up the first 250,000 to develop it, right? So we're co-founders, then we invest in the first round, and now we go and develop this brand completely together. And essentially, the Dyrdek Machine has finance, operations, and brand sort of leadership across the board that then we go through, and then we develop the brand, right? And so, this is to me that shaping and beautiful, like, where it's like, oh, should we put a brain on there? What should we call it? Is it feed your brain? Is it like, this is brain food? And then like, we're presented with this idea from an agency of like, what about mind right? And then I'm like, that's it. Mind right. It's cultural. Get your mind right. It's what the value prop of the product actually is. Like that, it ties right back into everything that this thing does, and what the happy brain blend and what it actually does, and the service that this product does put you in a mind right. Because when you get mind right, everything else follows. Right now, I'm seeing it turn into media. Now I'm saying like, oh, this is it. Before you break up with your girlfriend, get mind right. Before you go into the big podcast interview, get mind right, right? So now we're tying it all together, right? And so like, we're developing the product, and when it's a consumable product like that, what's the number one thing? Taste. Okay, great. You got this value prop that is nootropics and adaptogens that enhances your mood, and it's superfood and vegan and high in protein, fiber, all these things. But if it doesn't taste amazing, you're dead in the water, right? And so we built this brand, mind right, brain food. We called it the Unstoppable Blend. And I bought the website Nootropic Superfood. I'm like, it's genius. Nootropic Superfood. This is like some never been done. I just bought the website. But let's get out of the office here and test it. And so we take that product and we go in and we test it. We test it with all different types of groups and everything. And boy, oh boy, everybody hated the word nootropic. Everybody. And it's like, oh man, it's so true. But they loved happy brain. They didn't care about long-term brain health. They didn't care about anything other than mood enhancement, and that this would give it taste amazing and makes them feel better. So where we looked at it as, oh, it's unstoppable blends for entrepreneurs and moms on the go and all these, like, they really connected with happy brain and good mood. And it ended up being, we had this more sophisticated like packaging and all this. And really the majority that connected with it was 35-year-old women with an income below $75,000, right? And so we realized,
What market did you think you were shooting for?
yeah, we thought, when you're a guy creating a product, you're always a guy. You're accidentally aiming it to male, always, right? And you want to be 4-quadrant as best you can, and so, we ended up like making the packaging this iridescent, beautiful, soft, like, and what I realized too is like in that data, it was like good mood over everything. And the CEO hit me one day, said, I got it. It's good mood superfood. And I'm like, you got it. And then now it's mind right, good mood superfood, and this beautiful happy. Then I realized like, no, our entire ethos, feeling, everything with this brand needs to make you happy. Every Instagram post, every bit of the website, everything we ever create, it should make you happy. We're the good mood guys, right? And that process shaped it all the way into a place where now we're ready to go get seed capital, right? So because for me, it's like,
You don't finance it all yourself.
No. Like some I'll do the second round. I don't like to finance the seed round. I want as much strategic capital as possible to go to market, right? So
is it about the money, or is it about getting somebody else's input?
To me, it's, look, I'll tell you one thing for certain. You learn a whole lot about your business when you take it to raise money. right? You just do, because it's like the same way we learn so much about testing. Like your strategy, really, you show your business to a lot of really smart people who invest in other businesses to really dissect and give you feedback. That, of course, because as you're building, you get blind, and so I like that stage of just give us the information, but primarily give us strategic capital, right? And to me, that's earned media. It's relationships, other investments in like industries, right? I mean, for Mindright, we ended up getting Marcus Lenomis to lead the round, who has a huge earned media, The Prophet, if you're familiar with him. And
Sure.
then we got Joe
Did you
Jones.
know him? Is that a relationship you already had?
It's a relationship that I had, but I've never, we had never done a business till this one. It was only when I started posting the brand that he reached out and said, how do I get involved in this? Right. And the same way, and to me, that is, and then what sold him? When I brought him the product and he tasted it, right? So again, the brand, the storytelling, the feeling, the way we began to talk about it on social through the machine and what it is attracted strategic capital. But when he talked to the founder and the partner and the CEO, he realized real deal. When he heard the entire strategy, real deal. When he tasted it, this has got huge potential. In the idea of that's the depth of what you have to think about when you're putting together, really trying to build something that has an accelerated path to product market fit, right? Like at the machine, we're trying to be one big unfair advantage that accelerates you to product market fit, because from that point, capital's cheap and the business is fun, because it's you're optimizing and growing it rather than trying to find out if anybody even likes this thing in the first place. So, at that stage, we got Marcus, then we got Joe Jonas, right? So now you have this pop star that adds this deep earned media that then got us, all the Forbes articles and TechCrunch articles and all these things that turn into earned media, right? That support your launch and driving your business to market, right? And so, again, all of these things are part of the process and continually adding value by the time you get to market, right?
One thing that stops some entrepreneurs from trying to raise money is they don't want to have partners. They don't want to have to answer to somebody. They don't want to have to operate on somebody else's timeline, meaning sell the business when the investor wants the business sold, bring in new money, whatever it takes. How do you think about those issues?
Look, do not raise a dime unless you plan to give somebody a return. You know what I mean? Now, if you have a clear path to where you want to own, control your business, and you have a path to create some sort of return for them, say they get 10% of the company, and then you're going to run it efficiently and profitable and share that 10% with them, and you can explain that to them and they understand that they're going to, once it gets profitable, they will make their return over time. I think and then that's a special type of investor, right? That is not a venture investor, right? Like, do not,
Clearly.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's, if you want to maintain control and have you're looking for friends and family, high net worth individuals, like to a degree that are more friendly. But if you want to go out and raise money and create value and raise additional money, you have to understand how that business is going to be acquired someday. And I think you have to make that decision in the beginning. It's part of our process, right? Like if a founder wants to like, this is their passion project and this is what they want to do for the rest of their lives, and they don't ever want to sell it, and there's not some sort of clear path to making it profitable, and we're not aligned with where the liquidity is going to come from, then we don't do it, but I do think that anybody that starts a company, that's why I go all the way back to start at the end, like how this company becomes profitable, meaning the money you make from it, you have to have a clear path on what that is or what your goal of that is. And then if you need money to get there, then you need to create a strategy for that money that aligns with your personal goals of what your long-term vision is for the business you're creating.
Let's take a couple questions we got here. One's from Jason Tanner, a really good question about what's your relationship like with your the boards of your portfolio companies? How much involvement do you want to play once these companies get off the ground?
So for me, it's a pace, right? And I'll give you a complete structure. It goes from like weekly calls to bi-weekly to monthly to then just quarterly board meetings, right? And then to me, when a solid sound board is put into place after what I would consider most of the time in the A round, right? When you've really gotten to a place and now there's strategic A money that can now provide a lot more value for the board. Most boards and early before the A round are, you know, like the most sophisticated, closest person to the group almost. Board structures at that really early stage aren't usually overly sophisticated until true sort of venture capital ends up in there. And then for me, I like to get off the board at that stage, right? And then become the CEO's advisor, because I don't want to sit and board every single one of these companies' boards meetings. Two of them, I still am pretty active, even though, my pig out outstanding food just closed a $10 million round at $100 million valuation. And I'm still on the board of that, right? Just as it relates, because we want to go public next year, and I'd like to go through that process, right? I've never really, I sit on a public board right now with one of my previous founders, which is, a way more of an undertaking than I ever anticipated. It's not where I play, but I liked the journey of going with him on another company that he was taking public. So I do that. But for me personally now, I like to grow off the board and just become the advisor over time,
Got it. Are there things that you and the machine cannot offer these portfolio companies? At what point do they have to find guidance and help elsewhere?
I mean, look, we can't run your company. That's the big thing. You know what I mean? Like we're not an incubator. We're not economies. We ultimately are builders who have a team that can build you and help you hire everything along the way that you need to eventually go off. But you have to be capable of building and operating this business yourself. So if someone we'll be approached by someone, be like, oh, I can handle this, and then you guys can, take care of the operation side, be like, okay, we are not, no part of us. And if that's what you think we are, then we have nothing to do here. You know what I mean?
Got it. So we got a couple questions here from our mutual friend, Rod Kurtz. Rod and I worked together at Inc. magazine about 100 years ago. In fact, I made the switch from the print magazine to the website, and Rod had already made that switch. So I went over there and he basically taught me how to use the internet. I think he probably taught me how to click on links. So he's got some good questions here, including where do most entrepreneurs go wrong when they pitch you? What are they missing when they come to you with an idea?
Yeah, look, I think most that miss with me are when you're not looking at the idea through the multidimensional holistic business as much as product or brand vision. The output of we're going to make this and change the world versus how is it like a financially viable. And as what I like to tell people is money loves clarity, right? You're still looking at this, even though I want to create from the idea stage and it's my passion and I get caught up in all of it. At the end of the day, I'm trying to make a decision on the return on the capital that I invest here. right? And as you build a business, you want more and more clarity on how any investment capital you bring in is going to turn into more capital for the investor. And I think that's probably the thing that most people just underestimate and overlook when they're selling. They think they just need to sell the dream to an investor. And I think for a lot of, again, friends and family, high net worth individuals, like it's more of a, hey, let's take a shot. Like you can sell that dream, but anyone that's more sophisticated, who's really in my case, it's my personal capital, right? I'm not a GP here that has LPs, and I'm not managing people's money. I'm managing my own money. So I still look at everything through the lens of like, what is my potential return? As I look at, and I think people just look at that as an afterthought in the index of the deck.
Got it. Let me ask you about the pandemic a little bit. What kind of impact did it have on you and your businesses from a business standpoint? And now that we're coming out of it, what do you see happening for businesses going forward?
Well, look, I think the thing that I think is the truest is it's transitioned what's possible as it relates to who you hire and where they're from. I think for me, I hired a major executive I still haven't met in person. You know what I mean? And they live in the Los Angeles area. It's not like I couldn't do it. It's just like, I hired an entire team of people out of New York to build my media division. Have not met them in person. So I think there's an extraordinary revolution in the flexibility of how you can build a business now.
Well, tell me, what do you take from that? Are you going to keep doing it that way, or are you eager to get back to the old way of doing it?
To me, it's changed me for life. I'll never do it any other way. It's allowed me to be so much more efficient with my time. It's allowed me to, avoid, even though I live in the same, I don't even get on a freeway to go to my office. It's still 20 minutes there, 20 minutes back, right? That's still 40 minutes in the middle of the day here. That I could be spending with my kids in between meetings, right? So to me, I will probably never have a full office again outside of experience, right? So I have this beautiful penthouse in Beverly Hills. Beautiful. It's expensive. And right now it's a podcast studio. Right. So, and eventually it'll be a place, if you guys want to come and work, for those of you that are in the Los Angeles area, if not, we'll use it for events one day and content. Right. So, I think it's completely changed, but it's also changed. You now have access to such a larger pool of talent and a much broader and in a more cost-effective way. If you end up having a lot of outsourced consultants to manage a lot of the stuff that you do too, right? So to me, that was probably the great revolution that changed the way I'll do business forever. I would think that I was, before the pandemic, that I would only build companies with people based in the Los Angeles area. Right. And now it's like, I've never even met the guy in person that I'm building a new company with, based out of New York. I've never met him in person. And it's like, I wouldn't even have thought that was even possible. I wouldn't even thought it was possible to build with someone in New York, let alone never even meet him in person. The story that I told about MindRight, that was all done over Zoom. We did that last year. You know what I mean? So it wasn't like all of that happened all virtually. You know what I mean? So it was, it proved it for me ultimately. And then I'll tell you what it did more than anything. It defined the true do or die mentality of my portfolio and the founders, because every single person took it as an opportunity to be more focused, be more clear, now that they couldn't run around and where's the opportunity for their business, their brand, their time right now. It really became clear, those that used and adapted and used sort of this new evolved way of communicating and isolation to drive their business forward. Because a lot of people I know and a lot of friends, they it broke them and jammed them, and they ended up just like, it broke their spirit, if you will. And to me, they were fragile from the jump, because the seeing how so many people used it as an opportunity, to, and even for those that, their current business wasn't going to be able to survive it, they immediately took that new free time and energy to start something new or move immediately on. Was sort of the proof was in the pudding of who were the real ones versus the wannabe ones in that era.
You mentioned your podcast. I just want to say, I think it's called Build with Rob.
Mhm.
Is that, and I think you've got maybe 3 or 4 episodes out
Got
so
3
far.
episodes
Three,
so
ep-
far.
and your format is that you sit down and talk to the people, the founders you have going through the machine, right? And talk through what they're doing and how they've done it, where things stand.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately for me, I want to share the lessons that I've learned through the experiences with my founders and partners, right? Like, rather than, interviewing people that are outside the process, because ultimately I want another great entrepreneur to hear how we shaped and built, and the journey for each one of these businesses, and be like, I want to build with Rob. I want to build a company with Rob. Because at the end of the day, all I want to do over and over again is curate amazing entrepreneurs and ideas, and shape them into successful, profitable, sustainable, acquirable businesses over and over again. It's what I love more than anything. And so the way you do that at scale is the quality of entrepreneurs and ideas that find their way to you. And for me, I want the show to be not only a place for other entrepreneurs to hear the lessons that you continually learn as someone that does it over and over again, and hear us talk about how we did it to gather that insight, but then ultimately, have a world where other entrepreneurs are like, wow, I want to build with Rob. That seems like it'd be really fun.
Well, even for those who don't want to build with you or don't aspire to for whatever reason, I highly recommend the podcast. It's a great case study approach to learning how businesses are built. And I've listened to 2 of the episodes, and they're really fun and informative too. You guys, you keep it real. You talk about mistakes. You talk about what works. It's a great listen. So let's finish up with that question that I hinted at before. I think you're a true entrepreneur. I understand how that gets in your blood, and people can't get away from that, and they want to keep doing it. But you're doing it in a way that you don't have to do it at the scale you're trying to do it at. You could probably live comfortably with the money you have already. You don't need 100 million. You don't need 1 billion from the machine. What's your real why? What drives you to do this?
Yeah, it's funny. Like, me and my wife had this debate over vacation, of like, where I told her I don't believe in, I don't believe in the whys as it relates to someone's drive or their personal ambition, right? And she was super offended, which I thought was really funny, because I'm like, man, I say I'm fueled by the joy of creation. I love doing this so much. This is actually like my passion and personal mastery, right? So I know, I look at these companies almost like vintages of wines, and like, oh, this is the vintage before I understood founder market fit. Oh, here's when I didn't fully understand capital allocation. Like, it's all these beautiful, and you start to, I refer to as, you begin to see, as you get knowledge and pointed in a single direction towards mastery, your depth gets so wide, right? And then what does it become? More exciting, more fun, more effortless, more enjoyable, right? It's that sort of aspect that I love. And then for me, like, I I look at what I'm creating as also lessons and knowledge, intellectual capital that I get to pass down to generations of Dyrdeks, right? For me, my transition went from self-preservation to generational preservation after the success that I created and then having children, right? And so I have a 500-year plan of what it'll mean to be a Dyrdek. And even the way I structure, I own 100% of the Dyrdek machine. I always will. The way that I take all this sort of intellectual capital, if you will, and knowledge, and continue to categorize it. I'm going to build programs for the Dyrdek family and building a Dyrdek family bank structure that will provide capital and resources for generations of Dyrdeks to come, including I'm going to record a message to the family, 500 messages, so that like every year the family gets another like Rob speech at, you know, Forever Estates. I'm building a house that I live forever. But that to me is this exciting, how do you make an impact on Dyrdeks forever, you know?
Well, then that just leads me to one more question that I got to ask you. And I've had this conversation with a lot of entrepreneurs. You're talking about providing means for generations of Dyrdeks. That means that they're going to grow up very differently than you did. They're not going to come from Dayton and that kind of hard scrabble, growing up that you went through, that clearly must have had something to do with turning you into an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
Do you worry that you might be removing some of that entrepreneurial drive from the Dyrdeks to come?
I do not, right? And I think that always comes, then it's the great question, right? Because I won't demand or say this is what we are. At the end of the day, Dyrdeks have fully integrated who they are, what they do, and how they live seamlessly to be happy, right? At the end of the day, it's personal self-mastery that leads to happiness and mastering time and energy in relationships, right? And for me, that's the ultimate sort of foundation that I want to be. Now, for those that want to pursue the entrepreneurial opportunities that the family's bank has set forth, that would be their own decision to make. But first and foremost, when 200 family members get together in 85 years from now, 100 years from now, it's going to be 200 super happy, balanced, really optimistic, hopeful, amazing group of people will be my bigger intention, as opposed to just I got $1 billion company, you know what I mean?
That's great. I hope you're there to see it. Rob Dyrdek, this has been great. Thank you for taking the time. For those of you watching, if you want to know more, look up, Google the Dyrdek Machine, Google Build with Rob. It's a terrific podcast. There are lots of ways to learn more. But Rob, thank you. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Enjoyed it. Enjoy it.